I mean, the internet has been the great facilitator for new dynamic work processes, but also computation in terms of fabrication. So we have 3D printing, we have file-to-factory processes, computational design and computational manufacture. That means that the physical production side of things is done mechanically by machines, by robots. That includes agriculture, that includes manufacture, and we are all set free to become part of a creative design and research and marketing and finance, let's say, clusters. That's why we're all moving into cities, knowledge economy, where we can be very innovative, we can create new softwares, apps, which can be uploaded very quickly. So there's a lot of innovation potential. Everybody can become creative, and that makes the dynamic of social life in the cities much more intensive. So that changes a lot. But also I think what we as designers are in charge of, not only the physical spaces, but our colleagues also designing the websites, the interfaces of virtual and electronic communication, as we design the interfaces of physical co-present communication. And we also, as architects, we are one seamless community of designers, with graphic designers, with interaction designers, with virtual space designers. And I think that the next stage of the internet will be cyberspace, will be 3D experiences you move into virtual space, and they might connect up with physical spaces. We also have augmented reality, we have virtual reality, and we as art architects are highly involved in, we have a special virtual reality unit where we're working on these spaces not only for visualization but also as spaces of co-collaboration. And we're looking at metaverses, we're looking at cyberspace and conferencing potentials, you know, moving away from Zoom where it's just a graphics grid of faces and you only fit like 25 faces onto a screen and then the rest is invisible. How can we make a real three-dimensional space of communication, maybe connecting up with one face of a space where you have real people, virtual people, and that kind of is a new topic, and we are very much working on this and very much well placed to make that next move, I think, which is the current challenge. And so we're excited about these opportunities. Another point was very important in terms of the integration of artificial intelligence, in terms of the design process, in terms of also the environment itself. We can imagine a lot of intelligent robots and features of buildings, whether the windows open, light self-modulating, partitions and furniture shifting and roaming around, not remote controlled but self-enacted through their own intelligence. And the same would then be in the world of virtual communication. We also have assistants, AI assistants. So I think we will have a new world of cyberspace connected up with real space. That's for the next 20 years to explore. Both for Zaha Hadid and myself, academic exploration has been important for many years. And I've been teaching at the AA for over 20 years now, as well as in other places around the world, the US included, like Harvard University, Yale University, Columbia University. But the AA is my home base with the AA Design Research Lab. And what we're doing here, we're exploring themes which become prevalent, and we have more time and ability to experiment and develop new ideas in the professional context. Yes, so I think both artistic innovation and technological innovation come together in design, in architecture, in particular with Zaha Hadid Architects. So at the early stages of a style, and part of the research is not only technological research and functionality research, but also we need to find the forms which fit to these solutions. So the formal research is very important. So we don't only have kind of measurements and criteria and scientific evaluation, but the generation of new forms is something which only an artistic process can deliver. And the artistic process is like the mutation process in evolution. You generate a large array of options, you proliferate forms, and then the analytical and selective mind comes in to select and appraise and evaluate those forms. So the artistic process is the creative proliferation. And that's very important, and that has always been the case in the history of architecture, particularly in modern architecture. If you look at the 1920s, modern architecture, a radical set of innovations, was relying on abstract art and artistic practice from the previous decade. From 1915 to 1925, the artistic work was feeding directly into the architectural work, and that continues. Precisely, for instance, if you have new technology, new tools of design like software coming in from the animation industry, the first interaction with these tools is playful, is artistic, is creative. And then the analytic rationality has to come in later, because rationality is not creative. Rationality is selective and evaluative. So that's why it's absolutely important. There is no contradiction between art and technology. There are two stages of an innovation process, or two ingredients into an innovation process, which in the end moves from art to avant-garde design into mature solutions. So thank you for this question about the social agency of architecture and the importance of architecture addressing contemporary, urgent, societal, developmental, let's say, dynamics. So architecture has to fit into the contemporary society. And contemporary society is more complex and dynamic than the 20th century. So the 21st century is really a century of entrepreneurship, of self-directedness in work, of individuality and individual expression, and the diversity of forms of life, and also a fast changing and pace of life. And that complexity and dynamism needs to be captured, needs to be integrated. Now the role of architecture is, of course, these dynamics come from and demands of new social interaction potentials comes from society, but the solutions in terms of space, in terms of architecture, has to be created by architects. So that's the way we as architects, as leaders of the discipline, we have to understand the social processes. We have to, as architectural theorists and leader of the fields and innovators, we need to learn about society, about the theory of social processes. We need to understand even economics and socioeconomic processes to then identify the dynamics, to identify the problems, and then we bring artistic processes and technological processes to bear to invent these solutions. And then we need to also test. We need to understand how to test the social functionality of these projects, ultimately in real life, but we're also developing occupancy modeling, so social life process modeling tools, simulation tools, to try to understand whether these new spaces would actually deliver towards the new social dynamics and make, for instance, communication more intensive, make encounters more probable, and have, for instance, particularly in the work process, very, very new dynamics, how to make that credible. So we are learning from the social scientists and from the sociologists. Our agency is in meeting client demands and being imaginative and creative with the leaders of industries, with the leaders of cultural institutions, and have congenial conversations with them so that we know how their new social offerings could have a congenial spatial outlook. So that's our agency. It is facilitating something which wants to find shape and space. We are not setting the goals and agendas from the societal perspective, but we are congenial partners and co-collaborators with the great entrepreneurs and institutions who want to set up their institutions and give them a new spatial platform. So the Chinese market for us has been fantastic. We were growing together with China. So the history of the last 30 years of China growing is also the history of ZHA growing from 4 to 40 to 400 plus architects working globally. And China is one of our major markets, and increasingly so, because there's really the dynamism of growth and in optimism and a kind of risk-taking, adventurism, entrepreneurship, and the idea of great projects. There's also still the opportunity to build large, so as the city was evolving, whereas the UK and London is a very mature economy with a very mature city fabric, so it's much more careful, smaller interventions. The only exception is the City of London, the banking district, where you have a very kind of dynamic process. So for us, there is a big difference. We didn't get the opportunities of large-scale projects in the UK because it is so slow and so cautious here. And we had great entrepreneurs and clients in China, both from government side but also from the private side. For instance, with ZHA China, we did a number of projects in Beijing, 3 major projects in Beijing, as well as a major project in Shanghai. So this has been great for us, and so we adapt to local conditions, of course, to the scale of Beijing, to the futuristic outlook, to the flexibility of usage. So in some of the ZHA China projects, you have a lot of flexibility and dynamism of use. It's not so much prescribed, it's more open. And I think we appreciate that. Well, Beijing is a beautiful city. It still has some fantastic historical monuments. It also has a fantastic series of contemporary buildings, recent buildings, world-class architecture from architects around the world, and including Chinese architects. So it's a great place. I think the next stage of development on the urbanism side, one would have to look at traffic. And if I have something to criticize about Beijing, it's the very large inner city highways with 8 lanes, etc., cutting through, and this idea of mega blocks. So if you compare that to the city of New York, where you have a smaller grain of lines cutting through, you get more of an urban sense, capacity to have more pedestrianized zones, etc. So I was thinking about, on the urbanism side, that some of those highways should be bridged over with parks. And but overall, I think Beijing is beautiful, and also it's of course culturally the center of China. I think it's very interesting socially.